Hello everyone, I'm Callie Moore and I'm currently serving as the Western Regional Director for MountainTrue. Prior to coming to MountainTrue, I have 25 years of experience working with federal, state, local agencies and nonprofits in water and water quality. And so water is my favorite subject to do with the environment, and I'm excited to talk to you about water and the draft forest plan. I'm going to start by just flipping through some photos of ways that water is used on the National Forest and off the National Forest, actually, because our national forests oftentimes are the headwaters of many of our streams and rivers that we use for a variety of uses off the forest boundary. One thing, fly fishing is popular and fishing streams and rivers all throughout both national forests, but one thing that you might not think about so much is reservoir recreation. So Nantahala National Forest has several large reservoirs that are primarily owned and operated by Tennessee Valley Authority and or Duke Power. There are several different owners actually, but a lot of the surrounding shoreline in some cases is owned by the National Forest, is owned by us. And so some of the reservoir activities are ones that I wanted to particularly highlight because they're ones that you might not associate with the National Forest always. Drinking water is a big service. Really, I'll call it a service that the National Forest provides. There are several municipalities downstream of National Forest and nestled within the National Forest boundary that rely on the forests for their drinking water, and we're going to be highlighting those during the geographic areas portion of the presentation. But not just for individuals and residences, but many of our towns. This is Franklin, North Carolina, and their municipal water supply comes off the Nantahala National Forest. And so anytime there's fairs and festivals, or you go downtown to eat in a restaurant, or the craft brew that you might enjoy while you're in town, all of that is coming from National Forest water supply. This is Evergreen Packaging in Canton, North Carolina, and it receives all the water that it uses out of the Pigeon River is coming almost directly off Pisgah National Forest. So beginning in with scenic value, waterfalls are my favorite. So this is North Shoal Creek Falls in the very far western part of Nantahala National Forest. So I'll start by reviewing positives of the plan and then move into the highlights of concerns with the forest-wide plan components. And then finally, I will summarize each geographic area water-related goals and propose MountainTrue's suggested revisions. So providing clean and abundant water is one of 4 central plan themes in the draft forest management plan. So as such, obviously it's very important and is going to guide overall management direction for the entire plan. So very important and highlighted as such. The desired conditions for water are excellent, and there are also good water-related desired conditions, standards, guides, objectives, management approaches under several different categories, including climate change. And then we especially like these desired conditions for geology and soils that are located there, as you can see on page 29 and page 34, respectively, in the plan. The objectives for improving aquatic habitat conditions and protecting water quality for priority watersheds are really strong. There's a big focus on watershed improvement using this priority watershed approach, which is a good one. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later also. And then portions of 10 rivers and streams currently eligible for wild and scenic designation are carried over into the new draft plan, and sections of 9 others are added. We're going to move into talking about the forest-wide plan components now. And so MountainTrue has proposed revisions in each of these topic areas. So the first one is Streamside Zones, which is another word for riparian buffers. The draft plan currently provides no protection for ephemeral streams, only 15 feet on either side of intermittent streams, although they also have a caveat in there that says that because North Carolina BMP's best management practices require 50 feet, that 50 feet will be the default, which is kind of odd. And then 100 feet on either side of perennial streams. And then there is this possibility of encroachment by things like log landings, roads, skid trails, waste disposal areas associated with timber harvest if satisfactory mitigation measures have been designed. So this is currently what is in the draft plan proposal. So if I could, these ephemeral streams are, I'm going to just briefly tell you about the different types of streams so that you can understand what we're talking about here. But the ephemeral ones are the ones at the very top of the watershed here. So ephemeral streams really only flow briefly during and following a period of rainfall in the immediate locality. They do not connect with groundwater even during wet times of the year. The primary source of the water that's in these streams is runoff from rainfall, and they may or may not even have a well-defined channel. So these are at the very top. Most of ours do have a defined channel like the one in the photo that you see here, simply because we have such steep slope environments. But anyway, that's an ephemeral stream. And intermittent streams flow during a portion of every normal rainfall year, and they typically flow all the time during winter and spring. They have a well-defined channel, and they obtain their flow from both surface water runoff and groundwater. So there is a groundwater connection for intermittents. And the thing about intermittent streams is that sometimes in the summer and fall, the flow is still there. It's just kind of subsurface. And so you can go into an intermittent stream channel and you can dig around in the substrate and you can find water under there oftentimes. And you can even find benthic macroinvertebrates and other aquatic life. So intermittent streams are the beginning of the channels where you will find aquatic life in the system. Perennial streams are your typical streams. This is what you think of when I say streams on the National Forest. They have water flowing year-round. They're well connected to groundwater in the water table. Most of the water comes from either groundwater or the upstream waters, and the runoff from rain is typically supplemental. So these are the base stream network, the blue lines, if you will. And so before I get into our proposal, I want to just remind everybody of all the values of riparian buffers. So even though the initial value of putting aside this streamside zone adjacent to timber management, timber harvest and management activities might be just the filter and trapping and holding of sediment from the runoff, that is not the only value of these channels. And so even ephemeral channels provide, when you have native woody riparian vegetation on those channels, they're providing food and habitat, woody debris and things like that for aquatic life downstream in the intermittent and perennial channels. So they're very important for sending down the leaf matter and the woody debris that are going to be used by fish, invertebrates, and amphibians in other channels. All the streams and the riparian buffers on all the channels moderate water temperature. They stabilize the banks in reducing erosion. And this is another great reason to have a buffer on the ephemeral streams, is because when the rains come, and we're having more and more intense rains, as you know, when these management activities are going on, that buffer is highly needed for stabilizing the bank and reducing erosion on those channels. So our proposal for Streamside Zones is very much like other plans. Actually, they're finalized now. Jefferson National Forest, Chattahoochee National Forest, Cherokee National Forest all have protections for all stream channels. And actually, this draft plan has a desired condition that says that the intent is to protect all stream channels, and it even calls out ephemeral stream channels. And so you can see the reference down there, page 37, for that desired condition underwater, number 6. So we propose 25 feet on each side of ephemeral streams, 50 feet on each side of intermittent streams, and 100 feet on each side of perennial streams. And additionally, we want to see that objective, I think it is, taken out or deleted about if appropriate mitigation measures are in place, you can encroach on these buffers. The only place that we would allow encroachment during timber harvest of those things like roads and skid trails and log landings and waste disposal sites and what have you, the infrastructure related to timber harvest should only be allowed in rare justifiable situations and only in that outer 50 feet on perennial streams. The 25 and the 50 feet on ephemeral and intermittent should be protected for the value of the watershed, the benefit of the watershed. Other components in the Streamside Zone, there's 2 objectives in this chapter on page 41. One is to restore at least 3 acres of streamside zones annually to increase vegetation diversity. And the second one is to implement 3 to 5 stream channel improvement projects that focus on floodplain connectivity, stability, bank stability, and habitat. And we love these. But since there's a big focus in the plan on priority watersheds, there's a whole watershed chapter, and the objectives there are for these priority watersheds. There's 35 of them, and I'm going to highlight in the geographic area section what those watersheds are, so you'll be able to see that. But a lot of these so the components of the watershed plans that are going to be developed for some of these priority watersheds over the life of the plan are very similar to this. And we would like to see this activity happen outside of priority watersheds. So our recommendation is that these objectives be met in addition to the priority watershed plan objectives. The next forest-wide plan component is aquatic organism passage. So the current draft plan, well, first of all, let me say a word or two about aquatic organism passage. So typically, if I were to talk to you about barriers in a stream, you would think about dams or these, we've had a lot of these like just fish barriers that were put in to basically promote non-native trout fishing in our national forests. But the Forest Service has done a great job and has pretty much removed a lot of those type of barriers that can be removed. So when we talk about barriers to aquatic organism passage today, we're primarily talking about culverts. And so this picture that you see here is what we call a perched culvert. So over time, what's happened is that this thing has gotten disconnected on the bottom end, and this happens a lot all over the place. We just had no idea when we started putting in all these culverts, what a problem was going to be created for fish and other aquatic life to be able to move upstream. Okay, and so we're mainly talking about replacing these culverts, and I'll show you a picture in a minute of the best way to do that. So the draft plan proposal under aquatic organism passage is to work with partners to complete assessment of the aquatic passage needs over the life of the plan and to prioritize projects based on that plan that improve the entire aquatic community and enable reconnection or restoration of populations of native brook trout and other sensitive species. We love those 2 components. No problem with that. Sounds great. It's the kind of numeric criteria here that we have that we take issue with. So replacing a minimum of 2 impaired stream crossings annually is way too low. So our proposal for aquatic organism passage in the plan, and you can see here, this is what we call a spanning structure. In the next slide, we're going to talk more about the types of passage structures, but typically a bottomless culvert or a bridge, or this is a bottomless culvert type of spanning structure. That is the best case scenario for repairing these impaired stream crossings. So we would like to see the Forest Service replace a minimum of 2 large impaired stream crossings annually, one on each forest, and to replace a minimum of 3 small impaired crossings annually, making an effort to spread them out across both forests. So the Forest Service has a webpage about, this is National Forest of North Carolina, has a webpage about how they've been a leader in aquatic organism passage, and we agree that they have been a leader, and that's all the more reason why we feel like they should increase their goals related to aquatic organism passage. But anyway, this webpage talks about how the average project is approximately $60,000. So we're proposing that that be the cutoff between large and small. So a large project would be greater than 60,000 and small would be less. And then we're also proposing a tier 2 level for this one, that is to replace 3 large and 6 small, one in each ranger district annually. So that's kind of the tier 2 goal. And then also in this guideline that they have regarding channel spanning structures on fish-bearing streams, we would like to see them replace the word should with the word shall, so that initially, anyway, the feasibility of the channel spanning structure is evaluated. So we had an advanced question about this guideline on page 40, discussing other passage techniques. And so in the case of when a spanning structure is not feasible for whatever reason, embedding culverts is actually a decent secondary approach. We'll call it that. Embedding culverts is actually a 404, 401 permit condition for like the Corps and the state permits when you go to span a stream with a road. And what's happening is it's attempting to get the culvert into a position that lessens the chance for these things to serve as a barrier. So embedding is an attempt to mimic the natural stream bed in the culvert. And if you oversize the culvert, it allows the storm flows to widen out inside it. And hopefully that leads to a lessening of the erosive force of the water coming out of the culvert, which tends to cause widening of the stream and erosion of the banks on either side. So basically, we're just trying to, as best we can, create the little stream environment inside the culvert, and that's the next best thing when a spanning structure isn't feasible. Moving on to the transportation and access portion of the plan. This one is really a difficult one to tackle. So because resources for the Forest Service have been cut so much in prior years, the Forest Service unfortunately has a $40 million maintenance backlog for roads. And in addition, typically when they do go out to maintain a road, it's mainly just grading it, regrading it, and putting new gravel down. So this grading and gravel only maintenance practice often doesn't address surface water drainage issues. It doesn't prevent concentration of runoff, and is really just only a short-term solution until they can come back out and do it again. So real maintenance involves ditches, cleaning out ditches, making sure best management practices are in place where they're needed. So for instance, in this photo, you could install something like a broad-based dip or something like that to run the runoff off into a location where it's not going to concentrate. There are all kinds of best management practices associated with gravel roads. And the fact that the Forest Service basically doesn't even have enough resources to just grade and gravel them means that they certainly don't have enough resources to do all the best management practice work that would be required to actually protect water quality. So our plan, and so there's lots of information in there about how they're going to create plans around the road network and to assess the road system, but it's all kind of focused on the travel level of the road. And we think that what needs to happen is that the Forest Service should, on a geographic area scale, create kind of a triage system for maintaining the road network. So for a particular geographic area, they would go in and they would prioritize the road maintenance needs just across the board, and then start with the highest priority needs for protecting water quality. So to some extent, this is happening in priority watersheds, and we appreciate that. And a lot of the way that the priority watersheds were chosen had to do with places where roads were causing problems for streams. So we recognize that, and we recognize that in priority watersheds, this work is going to happen. But we think that to get to a sustainable and right-sized road network for the funding available, this triage or priority system based on geographic areas is the best way to go to get to a point where we can really be protecting water quality across the whole forest. And the last forest-wide component is in the terrestrial ecosystems. So the current draft forest plan has language in it that prevents traditional ground-based logging on slopes that are greater than 40% to guard against erosion and landslides. So we like that language in the current draft. However, apparently there are more ground-based technologies that are coming out that foresters feel are protective enough of water quality, and so that language was taken out of this current draft plan. And it was basically like professional opinion as to which practices should be used. And we feel like that's setting up project by project basis room for disagreement. And so we would like to see this language in the plan be strengthened, and possibly this language that I have here on the slide, like specialized logging equipment should be required on slopes greater than 40%. Or something like that, and then steep slope equipment should be at least as protective of soil as the skyline cable systems that are popular today. So that's our recommendation related to the timber harvest practices. And also there's this standard on page 66 that includes clear cutting for the purpose of enhancing water yields, and we don't feel that that's appropriate. And then one more positive that just happened to be in this section and would fit on my slide here is the management approach on page 77 related to location tracking and eradication of feral hogs. Wild hogs cause a lot of water quality damage on the national forest. We've seen a lot of problems with them in western Cherokee County and northwestern Cherokee County. And so, you know, tackling that is going to be a big undertaking, but fortunately there are partners to help with that. So that's a positive. One omission from the draft plan is there is not a recognition of outstanding resource waters or a naming of them in the draft, and we feel like that's a deficiency. So outstanding resource waters are classified by the state of North Carolina under the Clean Water Act, and they require that when you're undertaking activities within these watersheds that there is no degradation of water quality. That's the law. And so outstanding resource waters became that way because they have excellent water quality and they have one or more other outstanding resource values. And there's a list of them on the DEQ website, or the DWR, Division of Water Resources website. There are 9 outstanding resource waters within the National Forest in North Carolina. So there's 10 shown on this map, but number 6 is in the, this is Cataloochee Creek, and it's in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, so it's not the purview of the Forest Service. So there's only 9 that are within Forest Service boundaries, and I'm going to highlight them in their respective geographic area. And so we're moving into the geographic area portion of the program at this point. But again, we feel like that outstanding resource water should be recognized and goals should be set surrounding that anti-degradation standard. So the first geographic region in the plan, and so these are going to go from kind of the northwestern portion of western North Carolina all the way down to the southwestern portion of North Carolina. So for each slide, you're going to see a small map over here that shows the geographic area highlighted. And then there's going to be two slides. The first one is the overview, and all I'm going to highlight is the public water supply component and the goals for each one. But you can see here the selection of the priority watersheds. You can see some information about wild and scenic river segments and some other information that's pertinent for each one. But again, I'm not going to read all of that to you. So for Bald Mountains, we have one public water supply. And there was only one water goal, and that was to enhance brook trout populations in the Pigeon River watershed. So our recommendation for the Bald Mountains, so this is one that you're going to see a lot. So PL stands for Fiscal Edge, and GLS stands for goals. And so this was the 9th Fiscal Edge goal on page 157, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, provide high-quality water sources for municipal watersheds within the geographic area. Management actions will focus on reducing sedimentation and other negative impacts to water quality while sustaining forest health. We thought that was an excellent goal, and so we're going to recommend a goal similar to that in each GA where there is a public drinking water supply source. Okay? And then in Bald Mountains, we also recommend adding a goal to maintain water quality and habitat requirements for the rare and unique species found in the lower French Broad River. And we recommend changing the wild and scenic classification of Big Laurel Creek from recreational to scenic. The next GA is Black Mountains. We have 4 public water supplies that come off the Black Mountain GA, and they are Marion, Old Fort, Burnsville, and Weaverville. And this GA is also the headwaters of the Catawba River, which is a large river that flows towards Charlotte and into South Carolina and has several hydropower reservoirs and provides water supply for probably millions of people. So this is a really important GA for water supply. There's only one water goal, and that is to improve priority watershed function. And we're going to see this again. And so in the watershed forest-wide plan component, the only objectives in there are to improve priority watershed function. So that is already a goal in the plan. So putting it into the GA for Black Mountains is not adding anything new. So they're basically saying that the only thing they're going to do related to water is what they're already required to do in the watershed section. So obviously we have a longer list of goals. So the first one is to add that similar goal for protection of drinking water supplies that I just read. Also, the South Toe River in this GA is an outstanding resource water. And so we would like to see the Forest Service add a goal to uphold the anti-degradation tenets of the ORW classification for South Toe. Adding a goal to enhance water quality and habitat for Appalachian elk toe mussels, native brook trout, hellbenders, and other species, aquatic species of concern, even if they're outside of a priority watershed. Now, we recognize that a lot of these species are going to be in priority watersheds, and that's why they were chosen as priority watersheds. But it should be a goal in the Black Mountains GA to do that stuff wherever these species are found. And then also, so South Toe River, Rock Creek, and other headwaters are flowing off of north-facing slopes, and they're very cold. And they're very important streams from our perspective as a cold water refugia in the face of climate change. And so we feel like a goal should be added that recognizes that and potentially prioritizes more cold water fish brook trout and other species, prioritizes the restoration in those watersheds, and that watershed, that same watershed, is also an outstanding resource water. So they kind of roll in together, those two goals. And then finally, Virginia spirea is found in riparian areas, in some riparian areas in the Black Mountains GA, and we'd like to see a goal added to ensure that non-native invasive plants don't impact that rare riparian native species. Moving on to the eastern escarpment, we have public water supplies from 4 streams in the eastern escarpment. And then we have several goals here. One is to improve watershed conditions in the Johns River watershed, which is a priority watershed, but that's okay. And also to mitigate impacts from the existing off-highway vehicle area. So that's good goal there. And then expand the occupied range of the brook floater, which is a rare freshwater mussel. And another goal is to improve erosion, restore passage, and improve fisheries in Wilson Creek. And I believe Wilson Creek is also a priority watershed, but it's good to call out special places as well. So our recommendations are to add the goal about protecting drinking water supplies. And then Boone Fork and Wilson Creek are both outstanding resource waters, so adding a goal around the anti-degradation tenets of that classification would be great. Fiscal Edge. 3 streams in Fiscal Edge GA are water supplies for Brevard and Hendersonville, North Carolina. And they have really great goals in the Fiscal Edge section, 4 excellent conscientious water goals, including protecting water supplies, seeps and waterfalls at Courthouse Creek, and improving trail conditions at high usage area. So Fiscal Edge, you'll remember, is the one that I read that had that water supply goal. So this one had a really good set of goals, we thought. So our only recommendation for Fiscal Edge is to add the South Fork Mills River is an outstanding resource water. So just adding a goal to name that water and uphold the anti-degradation tenets of the rule. All right, moving on to North Slope. North Slope is the one that is above evergreen packaging that we saw the photo of in the slideshow earlier. So it is an industrial water source, not any kind of municipal drinking water, but it is a huge industrial water source for that facility in Canton. The majority of this GA is in congressionally designated wilderness and inventory roadless areas. So it's a lot of really remote and backcountry areas, but interestingly, it also has one of the highest levels of visitation, and this is because of the Blue Ridge Parkway and other U.S. highways that kind of bisect it, and so there's a lot of access. And so it's a really, even though it has a lot of wilderness and areas that people might consider to be more hands-off, because there is access to these areas, that still receives a high level of visitation. Goals for water include maintaining or expanding native brook trout range, protecting hellbenders, and improving stream passage for all aquatic organisms. So this is kind of the first place, but not the last place, that we're going to see these goals around improving stream passage for all aquatic organisms. And I just think it's interesting because these goals that were probably set largely by rangers in these particular geographic areas, they are all about improving stream passage, but then yet in the forest-wide plan components, they were only going to do 2 per year. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that it was interesting. So I think that raising those goals would definitely be appropriate if we're going to meet our geographic area goals. So our recommendations in the North Slope, so the West Fork of the Pigeon River and its tributaries are very similar to South Toe that I was talking about, in that they are on north-facing slopes, and they provide a cold water refugia in the face of climate change. And so we feel like a goal should be added that recognizes that. And then because of that cold water, situation that we have, we should plan to expand and not simply maintain native brook trout populations. And then we would like to see the North Slope goal number 7 expanded or broadened to include all unique aquatic species and not just hellbenders. And finally, we would like to see a goal added under partnering with others to accomplish that brook trout range expansion that we're proposing. So another of the major themes of the plan is partnering with others, and the Forest Service, I think, has done a great job of identifying partnership opportunities, but the partnerships to remove barriers is one place that section could be beefed up in several geographic areas. All right, now we're moving into Nantahala National Forest. We've been in Pisgah pretty much the whole time, and now we're moving down more into the southwestern portion. So Highland Domes is the first GA there. So we don't have any municipal water supplies here, but one thing that is interesting about this GA is that there are a ton of waterfalls, and there is more spray cliff habitat than any other geographic area. So this one includes the Whitewater River, where Whitewater Falls, has all these wonderful spray cliff communities, and there are many other waterfalls also have that habitat. Goals include enhancing native brook trout populations by improving stream passage for all aquatic organisms. There it is again. And there's also a goal around maintaining and enhancing the unique sandy bottom tannic stream habitat on the Highland Plateau, which we think is really great. And there are specific goals for special places such as Panthertown Valley and the Hiwassee Gorge. We recommend adding a goal because the East Fork Tuckasegee and the Savannah River headwaters have a bunch of outstanding resource waters, and I'm going to read them all off. They wouldn't fit on the slide, but in case you're interested, particularly in this GA, I'm going to read off what the ORWs are. East Fork Tuckasegee River, Panthertown Creek, and Greenland Creek, and those are also in the Tuckasegee headwaters. And then moving into the Savannah River headwaters, we have the Chattooga River, Whitewater River, Horse Pasture River, Big Creek, Overflow Creek, and East and West Fork Overflow Creek. So it's only, some of these it's only sections. The Chattooga River is pretty much the whole thing. The Whitewater River is pretty much the whole thing, but some of the other ones are only sections, but still it's a lot of outstanding resource watersheds in this GA. And so we feel like there should definitely be a goal around that. We would also like to see the eligible wild and scenic classification for overflow go from scenic to wild. Wild has a few more protections than scenic, and that was what was originally proposed by the Nantahala Pisgah Forest Partnership. And MountainTrue will submit additional information to help supplement what was initially submitted for adding Panthertown, Greenland, and the East Fork Tuckasegee River to the list of eligible wild and scenic rivers. We feel like they were ones that did not make the cut, but we feel like they should be in there. All right, the Great Balsam GA. We have the West Fork and Main Stem Tuckasegee River provides public water supply for pretty much all of the municipalities in Jackson County, Callie and Silva and all of that. It's a major public water supply. Goals are to enhance native brook trout populations by improving stream passage for all aquatic organisms and maintaining water quality for sicklefin red horse. And there's also a specific goal for repairing stream damage in the Roy Taylor area. And this is all historical damage that happened before this area became part of the National Forest. Our recommendations are to add a goal for protecting drinking water supplies, and then broaden this Great Balsam goal number 9 to include all unique aquatic species and not just sicklefin red horse. And then there is this last goal, number 22, is seemingly, I think they probably meant to separate it because one is talking about hiking trail organizations and the other one is the fish conservation groups. But we feel like the continued partnerships with fish conservation groups should be its own goal, just to make sure that it gets highlighted. The Nantahala Mountains GA has one public water supply. That's Franklin, North Carolina. That's the photo that I had showed you earlier. Goals are to maintain and expand native brook trout range and improving stream passage for all aquatic organisms. Also, there's a great goal in this one and several other GAs in this region around considering acid-bearing geological formations and project planning. And that's part of the forest-wide components as well, but when you have that type of geology in your geographic area, it's a good idea to call attention to it again. Our recommendations are to add a goal for protection of drinking water supply. And then also we have two outstanding resource water watersheds, Fires Creek watershed and the headwaters of Nantahala River, which also includes Buck Creek. And so we need a goal to uphold the anti-degradation tenets of the ORW classification there. And we would like to see the mileage for the newly eligible wild and scenic segment on Fires Creek significantly expanded. Originally, many more miles of the stream were proposed for wild and scenic eligibility, and only 2.6 miles were added on the lower end, and we feel like that mileage should be expanded. We also recommend that the Nantahala Mountains goal is broadened to include all unique aquatic species. Fires Creek in particular has a wide array of unique and endemic species, including the smoky dace and two types of crayfish that are endemic to the Hiwassee River watershed. So we feel like that goal should be broadened and not just include hellbenders. The Nantahala Gorge is the smallest geographic region, and it's basically just the Nantahala Gorge. So water is obviously a central recreational feature in this GA, but there are no municipal water supplies or anything like that, as there are no municipalities in this GA. One goal is to minimize non-point source pollution while continuing to provide river access for recreation. And a second goal is to enhance hellbender and native brook trout populations where appropriate. Our only recommendation, is to add a goal under partnering with others around non-native invasive plant eradication. So the Nantahala Gorge and several more GAs that are coming up have a large problem with non-native invasive plants, particularly in riparian areas along smaller streams, but there are partners out in this area that are willing to help work on that goal, so we suggest that that be added. Fontana Lake is a very unique geographic area. You can see here, it kind of reminds me of a gerrymandered political district or something, but it makes sense when you look at it. There are three major reservoirs that are central features of this GA, Fontana, Chioa, and Santila, and so the rivers that connect these reservoirs are kind of, those corridors are what make up the GA. General goals are to enhance native brook trout and sicklefin redhorse populations where appropriate. And then there's a specific set of goals provided for the Chioa River that includes restoring aquatic habitat, freshwater mussel communities, and riparian areas. Our recommendations are to add a goal for managing non-native invasive species, and also a goal under partnering with others around the non-native invasive plant eradication. So NG stands for Nantahala Gorge. So there's a goal already in Nantahala Gorge GA about managing for invasive species. And so we just want to have a similar one to that in the Fontana Lake GA. The Unicoi Mountains GA kind of tucks in around the Fontana Lake one and then extends down into Cherokee County. Public water supplies in this GA are for Andrews, North Carolina, which is in Cherokee County, and Robbinsville, which is in Graham County. Goals include enhancing habitat for native brook trout and sicklefin redhorse, and planning to minimize impacts in areas of acid-producing geology. Our recommendations are to add a goal around the outstanding resource water of Gip Creek, which is a tributary to the Valley River in Cherokee County. And then, just like in the last one that we saw, adding a goal to similar to the Nantahala Gorge goal for managing non-native invasive species. And then also adding that same goal around partnering with others around NNIP eradication. So like I said, this whole Graham, Cherokee, Clay County area and Swain County to some extent is a lot of problems with non-native invasive species. Last but not least is the Hiwassee GA, and kind of like that Fontana Lakes one, there are 3 major reservoirs that are the central features of this GA. These are all Tennessee Valley Authority reservoirs, Chattooga, Hiwassee, and Appalachia, and that spelling of Appalachia is not a misprint. For some reason, the TVA lake is only spelled with 1 P. So goals in this GA include enhancing habitat for sicklefin redhorse and planning to minimize impacts in areas of acid-producing geology. Our recommendations are first to highlight the Dye Bend Crowder Bluff Rare Alluvial Forest and Floodplain Pool special interest area. So I hadn't really talked much about special interest areas because there aren't many of them that are different from priority watersheds or ORWs, or, you know, if they're around water, they're usually captured in some other way. And so many times throughout the GAs, you'll see them list all these special interest areas that exist in their GA, and we would like to see this particular one listed for Hiwassee because it's just a really neat riparian and water type environment. It's about 50 acres. We would also like to add a goal under connecting people to the land to improve fishing, canoe, kayak access on Appalachia Lake. Appalachia Lake is almost completely surrounded by national forest, public land, and it's really kind of a wilderness lake. I mean, it's not wilderness, but, you know, it feels like wilderness when you're out there on it. And so we feel like that, you know, there's not a lot of water-based recreation that's provided in this particular GA by the Forest Service, except for in Clay County around Lake Chattooga, the Jackrabbit Mountain area. But in Cherokee County in particular, there's just not a lot of opportunity for recreation on the forest in this GA. And then similarly, adding a goal to investigate other opportunities for water-based recreation, such as paddling campsites or just float boat access on both Appalachia and Hiwassee lakes. All right, that's all I have for you this evening. I would encourage you, if you have questions or concerns about anything to do with this presentation or topics that I did not cover related to water, you feel free to email me at Callie@MountainTrue.org. This is the office phone number, and because of COVID-19, we're closed and I'm working remotely, but if you'll just send me an email, then if we need to chat by phone, we can make that work out. Thank you very much for your time and your interest, and have a good evening.